This is a project for History 450, telling the story of our past. Basically, the purpose of this project is to expel information about our past and the media and our perception of terrorism through a popular source that could get to the mass public. What I chose to do is a YouTube video on our perceptions of terror and how they're manipulated and changed through the use of media like Fox News, for example, or CNN, or The Daily Show, things like that, mass media.
When it's done right, using mass media to get public opinion about something or to expel information about a war zone, something like that, is a good tool. It helps the public get in touch with something that they normally wouldn't be able to get in touch with. But once you take that power into your hands and misuse that power in certain instances, with Fox News and misreporting, it's a dangerous tool. Reporting in itself takes on many forms, whether it be eyewitness testimony on an event being recorded, or newspaper articles on a certain event, or somebody giving out a speech and that being recorded and spelled through television, or newscasting or something like that. It takes on many forms. One of its earliest forms is journalism, and the use of newspaper and propaganda, posters, things like that, to get a point across. The first really popular media source in America was the use of journalism through newspaper articles to get people around the whole revolutionary no taxation without representation cause. And that was super effective. That's one example of when it could be used effectively and used right. Things like just reporting the information out and letting people draw their own opinions about it, or having reports in the zone and having people see the area around it and drawing their own conclusions. That's what the essence of reporting really is. But when you take that power and as a mass media expeller, and you take that power and you misuse it and don't check your facts and expel wrong information, it can get into a trickly situation where you're giving people wrong information and they're drawing wrong conclusions off this wrong information, and you get the public to think in a way that's not relevant to anything that's going around and it's not correct. One example of this is Fox News reporting on no-go zones in Europe, France, and England especially, and they even reported on this in the United States. As far as I know, no-go zones, they're prevalent, but they're not as hectic as Fox News reported. Every area, every country has zones where people don't want to be in, dangerous zones. That's everywhere in America, everywhere. But the way they went about reporting it, where they say that there was an external entity, external government enforcing laws in these zones, and people that weren't of Islamic religion weren't welcome in these areas. And it was interesting because they had reporters and experts on these topics come in to talk about it, but they didn't really check any of the credentials of these people and allow them to still spill out the information. This is a problem when it comes to expelling information at a quick pace. You don't have time to really check credentials and things like that. If you do it too fast, this is why you have to take your time and check everybody's credentials. There's a clip right here I'm about to show that gives a little insight on the information that they're giving out, and you could draw it.
It's a problem particular to cable news, with rolling coverage of an ongoing news event and plenty of airtime to fill. In come the so-called experts with instant analysis and punditry. Sometimes the expert opinion is the real deal, but too often it's a lot of hot air or worse.
As soon as the shooting stopped,
Fox News, like everyone else, tried to make sense of the deadly attack on the offices of Charlie Hebdo. But in discussing the roots of Muslim extremism, Fox's in-house terrorism expert offered a dubious claim.
Throughout Europe, Sean, you have no-go zones.
No-go zones, really? Even Sean Hannity was incredulous.
So basically, these countries have allowed Muslims to take over parts of their country, entire portions of towns.
These are semi-autonomous countries within countries in which the federal governments there have basically given up.
From there, Fox found a carousel of no-name talking heads to push the no-go storyline into the hundreds.
These 751 no-go areas are essentially ruled by Sharia law. They have no regard for French law.
One Iraq war veteran even claimed the no-go zones gave him a sense of deja vu.
I think it would shock a lot of Americans to know that in a 10-minute cab ride from the Eiffel Tower, you can be walking through streets that feel like Baghdad.
Even more shocked were Parisians, who found Fox's no-go claims absurd enough to be spoof-worthy on the French version of The Daily Show.
Breaking news.
Paris is a very, very dangerous city, probably the most in the world.
But one person who isn't laughing is the mayor of Paris, who's threatening to sue Fox News.
The image of Paris has been prejudiced, and the honor of Paris have been prejudiced.
Even Fox had to concede it might have been wrong.
Over the course of this last week, we have made some regrettable errors on air.
File under, be careful of the company you keep.
So that was just one example of when reporting on a story could go wrong. Fox News in general is an example of what happens when you have a mass media entity that could reach the mass, but that does reach the mass public, being controlled by a few people. What they think and what they want you to think is being spelled out, and makes it no longer a reliable source of information. It's the problem with popular media outlets when it comes to different stories, especially on stories of terrorism. They make the mass public perceive terrorism as something that is not, and it is a threat. I'm not saying that, but it just makes the mass public perceive it as a different threat than what it is. The next couple of clips are clips of Fox News apologizing for what they said, and it just goes to show that they know that they're in the wrong, and it goes to show that you have to listen to these stories with prior knowledge and go and check even their facts, everybody's facts, and especially when it comes to terrorism and things
France labeled as no-go zones. Some of the neighborhoods were highlighted incorrectly. We apologize for the error.
We at Fox News have subsequently determined that that poll is not credible and should not have been used or referred to, and we apologize for that error.
A correction now. Over the course of this last week, we have made some regrettable errors on air. Now, this applies especially to discussions of so-called no-go zone. To be clear, there is no formal designation of these zones in either country and no credible information to support the assertion there are specific areas in these countries that exclude individuals based solely on their religion. We deeply regret the errors and apologize to any and all who may have taken offense, including the people of France and England.
In this instance, the news source, which was Fox News, actually ended up coming and apologizing for the misreporting. But in too many instances, they, not even just Fox News, but other popular media sources, misreport a story or mistell it, and they don't even apologize or recognize that the misreporting occurred. So that just goes to show that you have to think for yourself and gather your own opinions on such matters, and check their facts, things like that. In conclusion, this whole project was to show how the idea of a mass enterprise reporting on the wrong story or wrong information could have the mass public think of an idea or of a subject the wrong way that's not relevant to the facts. And it just, the idea of terrorism, the over-reporting of certain terrorist attacks and terrorist groups and things like that, and the wrong reporting of certain events and things like that and groups has people thinking in the wrong way. And that's just one example of it being done.